Here we go.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. Your name's Lisa Parkinson, is that right?
Parkinson Roberts.
Parkinson
I've
Roberts.
got to have both. I wanted to keep maiden name, but my husband wants me to have the Roberts, so double banger.
Right. Cool. And you have a PhD.
Yeah, in nutrition science.
Beautiful. And so
Yeah.
are you in Melbourne?
Yes.
You are.
Yes,
And
I am.
cool. And so how
Yeah.
have
Are
you?
you?
No, I'm not. I'm near Byron.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah, I used to live in Melbourne last year.
Okay. All
Hmm.
right. So you can, still feel sorry for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. You've got friends and family here in Melbourne?
Lots of friends. Yeah, lots of people. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
hard to
It has been
watch.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
It's
what's
been hard not to be angry.
hmm And so
Mm.
how has it the lockdowns and stuff affected you?
Well, I'm pretty fortunate because I was working from home anyway. So I'm writing books at the moment, and I've got step kids living with us, so I haven't had to do any of the extracurricular stuff that I used to have to do. So, I mean, I was winning on several levels, but just seeing like that, it's just been so ridiculous, the injustice, the nothing has made sense about this, and seeing so many people suffer. Like,
Hmm.
and my background is mental health, both in research and personal experience. So I've just been feeling so strongly for everyone suffering poor mental health as a result of this stupid lockdown.
Yeah, and it's
So you're not
it's
recording now, are you?
yeah. Is that okay?
It's fine.
Yeah.
Started before I knew.
Yeah. I can start again if you want.
No, it's fine.
I can
It's
start again.
fine.
Yeah.
It's no, it's okay. It has been ridiculous.
Yeah. And it must be tough as well because like I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I haven't done research into these things, but I just go off like what I feels right and whatever intuition or common sense, let's call it. And I point out the inconsistencies that you see in the media, and you do your own research and you find um different science, let's say. So it must be frustrating for you, having a background in nutritional science. And
It is frustrating, and I was a bit like you when this first started. I just knew there was something not right going on. Like, my intuition just screamed, this is not right. There's some agenda here. There's something else going on. And then when you couple that with looking at, um, I mean, just the simple fact that a virus, we've been led to believe from all the propaganda coming out everywhere that, there's some evil virus that's going around jumping on people's shoulders and killing people. And we're breathing in thousands of viruses every day.
mhm,
And, this may be a new one, but it's just, there were so many different factors that have contributed to this outbreak, and we've got such reductionist thinking, like we're only focusing on this one viral pathogen, and the fear mongering and the propaganda and everything else it makes no sense on either a scientific level or just a basic human intuitive level. It just makes no sense.
yeah, yeah. And so um what is the most kind of your biggest point, if there's any one point or any like part of this that you're most disturbed by, or that you've seen and you're like, how is this still something that's going on?
There are so many different points.
It's hard to get into because there are so many points, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, so my own background is, as I mentioned, nutrition, mental health, and I myself have suffered poor mental health and was given drugs and told that I would be on medication for the rest of my life. And
Mhm.
yet I knew, something inside of me knew, that with the right nutrition, the right lifestyle habits, I would be able to reach a point where I didn't have to be medicated. And we've got this,
Can we go back to that?
I suppose, this belief system.
Can you go back to,
Yeah,
um,
sorry.
can you tell us your story about how that all came about, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no, sure. I've only just started speaking about it because I wrote a book and the publishers wanted me to include my own story. So, I've kind of come out of a closet there. But I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and told that I would be on medication for the rest of my life. And I wasn't really, I've always been interested in nutrition. I kind of spent most of my life in the health and fitness industry before doing my PhD. But I kind of had this inner knowing that I didn't have to be reliant on pharmaceuticals. Like, there was another way of managing my mind, so to speak.
Mhm.
And so when I was doing my PhD, I was looking at a compound in food that has potent anti-inflammatory actions, and
Oh, no, I lost you there.
off and both the body and mind. And so I sort of then went down that rabbit hole and came up with, a number of things that worked for me, that were holistic, as opposed to, giving the pharmaceutical companies more money.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what is your book called?
A well mind.
A Well
A well
Mind.
mind. And it's not really written for those who are suffering mental illness, but it's written for those who are wanting to learn more about mental wellness. Because when we talk about mental health, most of us will just focus on mental illness, but there's also that element, like physical wellness, and spiritual wellness. There's also that aspect of mental wellness, and we have to care for our mind to achieve that well mind, so to speak. So
Yeah.
it's a guide. Um, and it certainly worked for me, because as I've been medication free now for 5 years. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm
That's
feeling
su
good.
it's such a great point because we do talk about mental illness a lot, and all the awareness is brought to the mental illness, but no one talks about mental fitness or
Yeah,
mental wellness. And it's something that we don't discuss, that mental health is, or good mental health is not a baseline setting for humans. We tend to slide into decay if we don't tend to our own mental wellness. And so it takes practice and daily work and refinement of what we're doing in order to improve that, right?
that's right. Exactly right. And it's, I suppose, linking this up with the COVID lockdown, all the directives that we were given around this lockdown, isolate and stay inside and wear a mask. And there was no focus on nutrition or anything, but all of those directives are actually promoting poor mental health, as opposed to mental wellness, because we
Hmm.
need connection. We need to be outdoors. We need to be, have a sense of freedom as well to feel mentally well.
Yeah, they they
Yeah.
they they violate so many of our human needs, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, that was one issue I had with it. And uh, the promotion of fear
Mm.
has been another, because, as I mentioned, we breathe in. I have a very holistic approach to health anyway, but we're breathing in viruses all the time. And the viruses, they're just genetic material that we actually have viral DNA in they upgrade us.
Mhm.
So, I think we're 50% of viral material, genetic material. And it's insane to think that by getting too close to someone, that we're breathing pathogen onto this person, and that they should be scared of us. Like, it's just, None of it makes any sense.
Yeah, it is. It is insane, and it's very manipulative as well. To see, Daniel Andrews standing there at a press conference and saying, if you don't do this, people you love will die. Um, you know,
I know.
and so that's
And
very scary for people as well.
yeah, and if we look back to where this all started, I mean, Wuhan is one of the most polluted areas in the world, and it was always going to be an epicenter of some um, pandemic, so to speak, because uh, the people that they're unhealthy. Northern Italy, for example. So these are the places that were used for all this kind of fear mongering that we saw on TV at the time.
Hmm.
And Northern Italy has the highest percentage of elderly population. Their hospitals are inundated. Their ICUs are inundated at that time of year every year.
Hmm.
Every year, like they have 68,000 people dying of the flu every year.
Hmm.
And this year, what made it worse was we saw, remember the footage of China, people dying in the street.
Yeah, falling
Um,
over.
and in Northern Italy, sorry,
They were falling over in the street.
what was falling over or falling
Mm.
over in the street. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
Led to believe dying in the street.
Hmm.
But I'll go back to that in a sec.
They were wearing
And,
masks too.
so good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So in Northern Italy, their hospitals are always full. And this year, young people who started to get a sniffle would, panic and think they had this. Hospitals were then turning away the elderly to protect the younger, and we were hearing these stories, and it was all fueling this panic and this fear. But when you look, viruses, like as I said, they're genetic material that bacteria and macrophages will send out into the world when they're stressed, and we are such a toxic, polluted world now. We've got glyphosate being spread everywhere in our water, on our food, in our air, and those areas, as mentioned, are highly polluted. And viruses travel really effectively on air particles, on pollutants,
Hmm.
and cyanide, for example. And then you look at China and the people dying of this hypoxia, because it was never respiratory illness, it was hypoxia, and that's why the ventilators weren't working.
Mm.
Um, and you look
What's
at this
that? Can you explain
scenario,
that to
and
me? Can you tell me
so
what?
hypoxia.
Yeah.
So hypoxia is just when your red blood cells can't carry oxygen.
Hmm.
So it's different from respiratory illness. The best thing for hypoxia, my understanding, I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm certainly not a I can't even speak I cannot say it. An
It's a
expert in
virologist.
viruses. That's it. um, see, I talk really fast. So I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding of how viruses work, and I listen to a lot of Dr. Zach Bush. He is an expert in this field, and he's awesome.
Hmm.
And my understanding from how he's explained it is viruses will actually attach to air pollutants and cyanide and things like that you find in these packed in cities. And cyanide poisoning does cause hypoxia. And you've got this virus that targets the ACE2 receptor in the lungs. And so the little virus is kind of coming in, which we breathe them in all the time. And then in those who are immune compromised and don't have this healthy immune response to the virus are likely to show some of the symptoms that we have seen.
Hmm.
But every year, people die, and I find that this whole contagion narrative that has been forced down our throat has made people really fearful of something that naturally occurs anyway. The real pandemic is the pollution and the poor food, the processed food that
Mm.
we have, and the poor health that we see globally, particularly in Western countries
Yeah,
now.
we have an epidemic of comorbidities and people living below the health line, right?
Exactly right. Well
Mm.
said. That's exactly what the problem is. And we haven't had any focus on that at all during this pandemic. It's all been waiting for a vaccine, wait for a vaccine.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you go from there, from that panic, and then as as it came here, um, we've kind of modeled ourselves off, other countries and other, because I feel like at the beginning, like you said, that they're putting people on ventilators and that wasn't being effective. And I believe it was actually killing people because the numbers of
Yes.
deaths at the beginning were much higher. There was a big spike in deaths, that even though there's been a second wave, that the spike in deaths hasn't correlated the same way, which indicates that they've changed
Yeah.
protocols, right? To me, anyway.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Mm.
Yeah. The ventilators were definitely doing more harm than good. And a number of medical professionals have come out and warned against the ventilators right at the start and have
Hmm.
since said, yep, that was a big mistake.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny, I'm not quite sure how many millions of dollars that Australia spent on getting in ventilators.
Yeah, I think they upgraded from 2,000 to 10,000 in March, so they probably spent a fair amount. Um, and what was the other thing I was going to say? The Oh, I lost it. Like you were saying, just being focused on the death count, the death toll every day, looking at the numbers of people that die, it's really, does make people fearful. But we've normalized that, you know, millions of people die every year of all different causes, and we don't think about it. We don't focus on it. We just get on with life because we understand that at the end of your life, you die. And I feel
Yeah,
like a lot of these COVID deaths are repurposed flu deaths and repurposed pneumonia deaths, and they also share death cause with other terminal diseases and stuff like that. And so it's super manipulated and super disingenuous to say that it's just COVID doing this, and that the way to get around it is to lock everybody down and to stop people from moving and to prevent human contact. And it's just, yeah, and the worst one
yeah,
for me, the one that gets me most recently is singing, where it's like you can't sing in schools, you're not allowed to sing happy birthday,
mhm,
and just remove us
yeah,
from joy, because there's nothing quite like singing and connecting to music. It's part of us. It's like as part of our soul. It's so transcendent, and it just if you look at it from a conspiratorial, dark lord overlord point of view, what does the dark overlord seek to do? Disconnect you from your humanity, take away the beauty of life, and
that's right.
that's what seems like it's happening.
Yeah, they want to take away our individuality
Mm,
and have us all kind of. I mean, look at the mask, for example. They've been used for centuries to dehumanize and to suppress, and now we're forced to cover our nose and our mouth, and
mm-hmm,
there is. I feel there is a spiritual a kind of feeling around that when you look at your fellow humans in the street and you can, especially if they're wearing glasses, you
mm-hmm,
feel so disconnected and a little bit fearful too. I mean, from a female perspective, I've seen many blokes out walking when I'm out running and they've got the beanie on and the mask and the glasses, and it gives me a kind of an awful feeling. I wouldn't say
mm-hmm.
I'm fearful, but it's just yuck.
Yeah.
And I do feel very disconnected.
Mm. And so you've obviously done some research on that. What's your perspective on the masks themselves for their efficiency?
There's absolutely no good quality randomized control trial to show that masks are effective at all
Mm-hmm,
in preventing transmission. They may stop you touching your face a little bit, but then again, they may actually promote face touching more.
mm-hmm,
But again, this sterile environment, the hand sanitizers.
Mm.
I mean, we've got a microbiome that I'm very passionate about our microbiome and what we're doing to soil microbiome, human microbiome, the sanitized worlds we live in
Mm.
is contributing to poor human health. And when I see people, putting hand sanitizer on all the time, I'm just like,
Every time they
no,
enter
no, we
a
need.
room, every time you enter a room, you
Yeah,
put your
yeah,
sanitizer on.
that's right. That's right. And it's just, I mean, it's like antibiotics. You get a cold or so, well, not a cold, but bronchitis, for example, go to the doctors will give you a pill, and we're slowly, killing our important microbiome. It's so important for health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, as I mentioned before, these viruses are just genetic material that are sent out from the microbiome and macrophages and everything under stress. And we've put, I'm going off topic from COVID a bit here,
Go for it.
it's all connected.
Yeah.
But we have our soil microbiome, we have decimated. And, healthy soil, healthy plants will draw down carbon from the atmosphere. And the carbon is actually a big problem with pollution and virus transmission. Viruses travel faster when they're on these air particles and carbon.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got such this amazing ecosystem right under our feet, and yet we have destroyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important for human life. And then we're cleaning everything with disinfectant and taking antibiotics, and
Yeah.
it just does so much damage.
Yeah, it feels like the perimeters of the hospital are expanding, and so we're living in like more sterilized, and it's like you're not allowed to take the risk to expose yourself to the world anymore, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
right. We're all
crazy.
going to be sitting at our desks in front of a computer and
Hmm.
isolated from everyone. It's just,
Or in a pod and plugged into the fake world. Um,
yeah,
it's it it what was I going to say about the masks? Um, it seems crazy that if they actually worked, like if your mask worked, then if I'm not wearing one, it shouldn't be a threat to you, right? If it's so effective, then me not wearing one wouldn't be any harm. The same goes for vaccines, and I'm sure you probably have done some research on vaccines as well. If mine works and you're so confident that they work, then I don't, then you don't need to have one for me to feel safe.
I
And
know,
so
I
the
know.
yeah.
I think that the mask thing is just the start, because the messaging behind the mask is you wear a mask to protect others, and if
Hmm.
you don't wear a mask, you're selfish.
Hmm.
And the same messaging will be, well, there's already a trial out being conducted at the moment looking at the right messaging for the vaccine, and
Hmm.
they used the selfish kind of aspect of, oh, well, you're selfish if you don't take a vaccine because you've got to think of other people, and
Hmm.
or you lack courage if you don't have a vaccine. All these things in this study, like, it's just so manipulative, and it's also quite transparent
Yeah.
for people who are kind of in tune and are connected to their intuition. It's very transparent,
Yeah.
but there are still many that don't see what's going on.
It's that's a crazy thing, and it's interesting thing as well, to be able to see, like, you look for the evidence and then you find the evidence and then you go, hey, I found this evidence, and people go, you're crazy. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
I'm just showing you the stuff they're publishing. It's only what they're publishing that I'm showing you, and they don't
I
want to see it.
know. I know they don't, and you can always find something that counters. Like, I mean, that's what science is about. You can always find the two sides of the story, but to critically evaluate the studies, like, that's a whole different thing. And you
Hmm.
find, people who are writing journal articles, they need to, and they want grants, so they'll put it all in the abstract, and people will just kind of flick through the abstract and then all the fine print's underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And so people aren't really reading into it and doing their own research. We're definitely a culture of listening to mainstream media and just grabbing headlines and running with it.
Yeah, yeah. I do my best to try to read those studies, and a lot of the times when it gets technical, I fail. But my what I always come back to is, people, you have to have a baseline of choice, right? Because we don't. I think one of the biggest um, kind of uh, mistakes of thinking of humans is that we're in control, and that this goes back thousands of years of us trying to control and manipulate, and we don't have control, but we do have choice, um, and
Yeah,
to take that away from other people, you take away their choice and it gives you control. But it's a very dangerous thing, historically, uh, and to just blanketly assume that science knows best for vaccines, and one size fits all, like one vaccine. How crazy is that? Imagine everyone getting the same pair of undies. Here, you all get the same pair of undies. Doesn't matter if you're a baby, if you're an adult, if you're 150 kilos, or if you're 400 kilos, you get the same pair of clothes, same size shoes, or something like that. Something ridiculous. We're all
yeah,
different. We all have different bodies, different biomes, different nervous systems, different needs. We're in different times of life. And just the idea that we're going to market this one poison, to the whole population without any kind of forethought that that everyone's different, seems
yeah.
crazy. And then on top of that, not only that, we're also going to make it so that you can't refuse it. So
I
that's
know.
that's the scary part for me, anyway.
And the manipulation around that too, it won't be mandatory vaccines, so to speak. It'll be like the no jab, no play rule. If you don't get vaccinated, you won't be able to travel, you won't be able to eat at restaurants, you won't be able to
Hmm.
work, for example. So that is definitely, I'm assuming, that the way this is headed, which is scary for a lot of people.
Hmm.
When it comes to, I really feel for those people not being able to work unless you have proof of vaccination.
Yeah.
And this has been coming for a long, long time. And the COVID, or the pandemic, has just been the gateway, really,
Hmm.
to to exert that power and control over us. But
Sure.
we're very much a band-aid society. Like, we grow up and we want our mother, well, we have our mothers fix everything for us, and then we go to school and we listen to everything the teachers tell us, and then we go to work and we're submissive to our boss, when we first start work. And then we go to university, we listen to the lecturers. And I mean, I lectured at university after my PhD, and now I go back to all the things that I taught around dietary guidelines, and I'm just like, oh no, that was so wrong.
Yeah.
But we take everything that other people tell us as gospel.
Mhm.
And then, if we get sick, we go to a doctor and we want a pill, and the pill's going to fix us straight away. And if we want to prevent disease, we'll take a vaccine.
Mhm.
Um, we're just, I'm very passionate about body governance. Like, we have to take control of our own health and wellness and stop relying on other people,
Mhm.
because we do it best. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
By eating
I could go
eating
on and on
well.
and on about
Do
that.
do do go on and on about that, please. I I feel like,
Take back
sorry.
control. Sorry.
Yes, go on. A little bit of a
Oh,
lag
Dan,
here.
oh, we just, we just need to take back control, rather, and responsibility. I think that's another thing we try and avoid all the time is, and deep down inside, I think many on some level know that what's going on is wrong. There have been enough doctors, I'm going back to COVID now.
Mhm.
I'll just jump from thing to thing.
That's cool.
I think that there have been enough enough doctors now. The PCR tests, I've worked with PCR tests on the insert of the package. This is not to be used for diagnosing disease. We know that. We've been told over and over and over again. We've been told that it's flawed. We also know realistically that when our Premier gets up and talks about cases every week, that a case is just a positive PCR result. It's not a clinical case. It's not someone sick and dying in hospital. It's a positive PCR test. And what's interesting is with SARS and MERS, they didn't use this kind of modelling. They used bloods and they were clinical cases, whereas here it's just been this PCR test. And the problem with that is, as I keep going back to, viruses are just packages of RNA and we incorporate them into our body. And so the PCR, it's not specific enough. It doesn't tell us what virus is in there or how much of the virus is in there. And so we're getting all these false positives. And I remember right back when this started, I looked at a paper and it found that there were 80% or 79% false positives. And that paper was later retracted.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know, we've all heard from enough medical professionals now to know that the testing is flawed. And yet people are still sitting back and waiting for these case numbers to come through.
Yeah.
It
That's
makes no
the
sense.
preposterous nature of it, is that we're not talking about cases, clinical cases. We're not talking about hospitals being overrun. We're not talking about doctors being overrun with COVID patients. We're talking about people getting tested in the drive-through of a BWS or whatever, and then it comes back positive and they're not even sick. And so that person's then locked in their house. Their relatives are then locked in their house for 14 days. If they've been in contact, even though there's no sickness. So it's very much a manufactured thing. And I wouldn't be saying this kind of stuff if there was evidence on the contrary. And I think that's a part of the problem. There's a lot of people think that we just want to be convinced that there's no COVID, so we're making up stories. But I'm looking for the evidence that it is what you say. But when you're testing people that aren't symptomatic, that means that they're not sick. And if we're being convinced that people that are asymptomatic are sick, then that's a sickness. That's we're being manipulated to think healthy people are sick people.
That's right. It's the biggest manipulation to make you believe when you're healthy that you are actually sick. Like that's wrong on so many levels. But back to the PCR testing, there was an interesting study. I love this, and it was conducted on 8,700. It was healthy. It's a healthy population. And they used PCR to test how many viruses this healthy population had. 6% had positive PCR results for HIV. 1% in a healthy population, in areas that have low prevalence of HIV, and 1% had influenza. So you've got 6 times more HIV in a healthy population than influenza. None of them had any symptoms. They were healthy, and yet HIV was coming up in these PCR tests. So I think I said earlier, we're such a reductionist. We have such a reductionist way of thinking that it's always one thing. If you think of HIV, you think AIDS. If you think of SARS-CoV-2, you think of COVID-19. But in fact, with AIDS, there are several viruses that contribute to the symptoms of AIDS, like herpes. I think there's 8 and 9 different herpes viruses in there too. So it's very unscientific to say that HIV causes AIDS, just as unscientific to say that SARS-CoV-2 causes COVID-19 or the symptoms of, because those symptoms could be from, as I mentioned before, cyanide poisoning from too much pollution and comorbidities. And, there's just so much there that needs to be unpacked. And instead, we've just locked down the world.
Yeah. And so when is this correct? When we are shedding virus, when we are like what they would call contagious, when we're having viral shedding, is that just the body releasing that virus from our cells to get rid of it, to purify? Is that what's happening?
Well, we're going to keep some of the virus because it's upgrading us. It's actually being incorporated into our DNA. But yes, we do. It will go everywhere, and
Mm-hmm.
other people will then take in the virus, and it will be incorporated into their DNA and everything. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
They may get a bit of a fever. They might not. But it's when you've got really sick people.
Oh no.
And so if you are living in a heavily polluted area and you are unwell, you may get some symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're likely to get sick anyway because you're unwell and you're living in a heavily polluted area. So
Yeah,
it's the flu. I think I heard Dan Andrews saying that, well, we don't have the flu to worry about anymore.
it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Miraculous.
Yeah, it is. He's conquered the COVID and the flu. He should get a statue, I think, soon. Um, yeah. So there's two bits of manipulation. There's the one that healthy people are sick now, and the second one is that breathing fresh air is a threat to other people as well. That's one of the obviously horrible, manipulations, that healthy people are a threat to other healthy people.
I know, and it's actually really sad when you think about it. And I have passed. I don't wear a mask. I don't go out a lot anymore, but
Mhm.
I don't wear a mask. And my daughter's amazing because my kids are older. I started very young, but she was right at the start of it. She said, well, no, I'm just not going to wear a mask. And she'll go into shopping centres, and she's been abused. She's had terrible things said to her, which of course upsets me because she's my daughter. But
Mm.
she's just had abuse for not wearing a mask, and yet she's fit and healthy and has absolutely no symptoms of the flu, let alone COVID-19.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's definitely caused division.
Hmm.
And I think that's
It's a
what was always intended.
it's a virtue signal, right? If you wear, you care, kind of thing.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
a sign of compliance and and conformity to the state, really. Or one side of politics.
that's right.
Mm. So what about, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't really understand that. Sorry,
You're right, continue on.
I don't understand the political. What? I
uh
couldn't hear you, Dan. Say
yeah, it's
again.
the connection's a little bit funky right now, that's all.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I can't understand why it's a political issue at all. I must be really naive there.
Mhm.
Other than if you want to go to American politics, Trump said that masks aren't necessary or something like that. But I feel like it's more of a health issue than a political issue. And I don't think that it's healthy to be covering your nose and mouth when you're out in fresh air. I
Mhm.
don't see. I mean, just again back to intuition. Everything screams no.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah. And especially when you are healthy, like fair enough if you had a symptom or you felt you were like you were sick and you were like, I'm going to do the right thing by everybody else. If I am sick, I'm going to protect them. But when you're saying to everybody, you've got to do this thing, and but you're like, but I'm not sick. And when you put that on, you're kind of telling yourself that there's something wrong. And so you're creating
Exactly.
this kind of the body's going, why is something wrong with me? What have I got to fight? What's going on? And it probably, just crosses the wires a little bit.
Both fear and yeah, there's something wrong with me.
Mm.
We always think of medical Hello.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear? I can't see you though. We have a problem, Houston. There we
I
go.
can now. You just
Yeah.
froze.
Yeah, I've got a situation. I have
Is it me or you?
no, I have rural, I can't say this word. Rural Wi-Fi. Rural Wi-Fi. So
Okay.
it's not.
I'm glad you're tripping over your words too.
Yeah, you're a virologist and I'm a rural Wi-Fi. Can't even say it still. So um maybe the government's cutting us off.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's go back.
I'm quite proud of my conspiracy theories.
Let's go back to you for a sec.
Yeah. Oh.
What about what was I going to ask? Are you spiritual?
Yeah, I am. I
Mhm.
definitely am. I always have been. I'm um, on a bit of a journey at the moment. So I have always believed in a higher being, whether it be God, whatever, God, universe, whatever. But
Mhm.
for me, it was always God. And I dabbled in the Christianity of the evangelical nature.
Mhm.
Hallelujah, praise the Lord.
Mhm.
I've also regularly was attending a Baptist church. I did a diploma in Christian ministry. I was really, really interested in Christian apologetics, so the defense of God. So looking at the evidence behind, the New and Old Testament and the history and everything else. Like I loved it
Mhm.
so much. Um, and then I fell away from that, and I've always believed but just kind of didn't have any spiritual connection. And then more recently that's been coming back, but I'm not sure where I sit with I just don't know. I just know that there is something more, and we have a higher consciousness that needs to be evolving all the time. And I'm actually excited about what's going on at the moment, because I do see this awakening, and I do see, this collective consciousness kind of molding or melding together. And I know it all sounds very new agey, but it's just, it seems to be lifting
Mhm.
something, if you know what I mean. Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't articulate
It's
that
it's
very well.
something I was thinking about the other day. We talk about crimes against humanity. It's almost crimes awakening humanity, because before we're kind of just like we're
Yeah,
just chipping along at our own, in our own worlds, and this stuff is causing us to awaken to the darkness and then find our own power and come in, bring that into the world, which is what we need. And so while on one
yeah,
hand
yeah,
on one hand it's destructive and it's bad, and obviously I make videos about it every day, and shake my fist at the powers that be. I also understand that there is an awakening happening, and it ultimately is good. It ultimately is awakening people to shake themselves out of the dream that we've been living in, and to make the changes we need in order to make us as a species relevant to this planet, moving forward. And so,
yeah,
yeah, there's both things happening. It's terrible and it's also necessary, you know.
yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
totally agree with that. I think that yeah, it's exciting on many levels, but terrible
Mm-hmm.
on other levels. And it's been interesting too, because I have many friends and family members who just roll their eyes at me, and who have actually criticized me at times as well.
Yes.
And yet I have, you know what that feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And yet I have other friends and family, and it seemed who kind of the same sense that there was something not right going on. And I look at the two different groups, and I can see the difference in that um, just connection with nature, connection with a spiritual side, they're the ones that are kind of going, this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the other ones are like, oh no, the government's here to protect us and to look after us, and they're saving our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been interesting to see that connection as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it's very there's so much contrast now. Like you said, it's so clear who's on this side and who's on the other side, and it's very like apparent. There's a very big divide, and I think that a part of seeing the media lie about protests, and then you're able to look on your phone and say, oh, they're actually being peaceful, and there's actually a lot more than what the media says. But when you turn the media on, it's just got one person with a flare hitting a police horse with a stick, and we're able to see the lies so much more clearly, so that at least anyone that is curious and that is looking to awaken, it's able to happen much quicker. And
Yeah.
so that's, if anything, that the benefit of that is that even for me, who I'll say I've been awakening for 5 years, I've been going down the process of self-discovery and meditation and self-reflection, and even still to the things that are coming up are shocking me, and I'm going, really, are they really doing that? And it's really still, so I can understand for people that have never done any inner work or any self-reflection, it's like, whoa, I can't believe that, because for me it's hard to swallow
Yeah.
sometimes. But for people that are open-minded and they're coming to it with like, all right, let's have a look at this, then it's much quicker process, because it's all there in front of them if they want to go down that path and of discovery, and it's all the evidence is right there, and it's all out on display right now.
Yeah.
Like Daniel Andrews isn't hiding that the vaccine's his solution to this problem, that doesn't affect 90% of the population. And so, man, child, and all the children, is the kids, is the thing that gets me, is that they want to put this experimental poison into a whole generation of children, um, for no reason, because the kids don't suffer from COVID. And so,
Yeah.
the agenda becomes
I
very
know.
clear to anybody willing to look.
It does. And I was never against, and I'm still not anti vaxxer,
Hmm.
so to speak. I'm just pro choice, like most people.
Hmm.
But I had never really considered it. I mean, I vaccinated my kids when they were young, which is, almost 30 years ago now,
Hmm.
and never considered it. But again, I'll talk about my daughter. She has two babies, or one's turning 3. And she just felt that the vaccination, it was wrong, and that she shouldn't do it, and felt forced into a corner. And that's what they're doing now, is forcing everyone into a corner. If you don't
Hmm.
get your kids vaccinated, they don't go to school, or you don't get funding for preschool or whatever. And it's just, they've taken our choice from
Hmm.
us. So yeah, I've done a complete turnaround on vaccinations now too, because of this COVID. And I think that that's the case for many people.
Hmm. They start
We're
researching
learning
something.
more.
Mm. Start researching something that we previously just
Yeah.
accepted. Mm.
Yeah. The flu shot, I looked at the ingredients in the flu shot, and I remember when I was doing my lab training, formaldehyde was one reagent that I remember them saying, oh, so toxic, don't go near that. And it stuck in my mind. And then not long ago, I was looking at the flu shot ingredients, if you got ingredients, and hide. And I'm just like, what? And so then I kind of started looking, and they justify it with, oh, it's only a small amount, but people are getting a flu shot every year.
Hmm.
Insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like
You're
you
cutting
said,
out again, Dan.
and like you said, people are now starting to, um, you know, open their eyes to what's going on, and then we become more aware that there's a media manipulation involved, and there's anyone that doesn't obey the mainstream narrative gets shunned, and celebrities, if they speak out against it, they get put in the crazy bucket. And so it's quite, it's very clear again to people to start thinking, well, if I'm approaching this with an open mind, um, and I'm getting shunned for it, or I'm being bullied, then it just reinforces that there's something wrong here.
Yeah,
Mm.
censorship has on social media platforms, and it is equivalent to book burning, I believe, because
Mhm.
if it was happening before COVID, particularly in the health space. Anyone who was against the use of pharmaceuticals as um, first called, that they started to censor them, and the information that they were giving out was harder to find. Not impossible to find, but harder to find.
Mhm.
And now you see what's happening on social media. Oh, it's terrible. It's
Yeah.
really bad.
People getting shut down, posts getting censored, fact checked by fake fact checkers. Yeah,
Exactly.
and that the thing that scares me is that this microcosm is what the whole world will become in the 5G smart cities. Kind of everything's monitored by electronics, everything's being recorded and uploaded to a cloud, and
Yeah,
and people will be able to be censored and cancelled and have their money stopped and access to
yeah,
certain things, travel, and whatever it is. In If you don't comply with the algorithm, then you'll be cut out of it. And
yeah,
it's not a healthy place for anyone to live, because it totally kills our creativity and our expression and our ability and capacity to think, where instead of acting out of your from source, you're acting out of, what does the system allow me to do, what am I allowed to do, what am I supposed to do to get good brownie points in this system. And that's completely
yeah.
contrary to our nature. It's a complete violation of our nature.
I know. It takes away our humanness.
Yeah.
You're right. It is complete violation. No,
Mm.
that's so true. And I don't understand. You talk to people about what goes on in China and Russia and those countries, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's terrible. It's so totalitarian. It's so awful," and yet it's happening right here.
Hmm.
They've started those processes now,
Absolutely.
and we're sitting back and allowing it to happen.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's not good, but I'm very hopeful that something good will come out of a different way of living
Hmm.
for most of us anyway.
Hmm.
I like the idea of a commune, out somewhere where we're all bartering and trading, and that's kind of an escape. But it's not really feasible for most. So
Yeah. Um,
yeah, it'll definitely be. We'll have to find a different way of living.
yeah, hopefully
What was that?
hopefully it will be coming back to the holistic way of living, and tending to our soil, and not putting chemicals in our soil and in our water, and spraying our air with crap, and all these kinds of things that we know, well, that half of some of us know, is the way to do things. And people eventually come around to waking up to that,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
through this
Well,
process.
I think we needed this to even get to that point because, as a population, we're so disconnected from the soil, and we were heading for the collapse of civilization anyway. I mean, that's apparent,
Hmm.
just in how much healthy soil we have left, like how
Hmm.
many harvests we have left, and we need a kick up the backside, so to speak, to change the way that we live, and to stop being so disconnected from our food as well, just
Hmm.
just from everything. Whereas I think what COVID did, what on a positive note, was made people start to think about self-sufficiency and growing their own food, and moving out to the country and getting away from city life and working from home rather than having to commute every day, and spending more time with family. So there have been a lot of positive things that have come out from it, and I think that's what we need just to survive as a species at the moment. We need to really
Hmm.
start, taking our focus off this pandemic and start looking at the things that contributed to it in the first place.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And yeah, soil is definitely, it's my new passion project. So it's my next book is regenerative living,
Beautiful. And so tell us
changing
about
the way we live.
the one that's coming out in March. Is
Yeah.
that when it's coming out?
So it's a well mind. Yeah, it's called a well mind, and it's in it, as well as some people that I've worked kind of, bring back from the brink, so to speak. A lot of it's heavily saturated in research, so I did a lot of research um, towards that book, but it's kind of presented in a way that's easy to read. It's just like a toolkit, really,
Hmm.
on how to attain mental well-being. It would have been good if it had come out a bit earlier, actually. We could do with that now.
Yeah.
But March 2021, so
You can't pull
that
it
would be
forward.
good. And sorry?
You can't pull it forward till get it out in November.
No, well, interestingly, it was supposed to come out in
Mm.
November, due for release in November, but my publisher decided that and I'd need to go and try and promote it in some way. So for that reason, and I don't have a huge bring it out next year.
I lost you for a little bit there. Sorry.
Oh, what did you lose?
Um, the
I was just saying, yeah,
that's all right. I'll pick it up. I'll pick it up later. Um, uh, I'm going to wrap it up because it's a little bit glitchy at the moment. But it's been an absolute
that is,
pleasure to chat with you, and hopefully,
thanks, Dan.
the next time we speak, it's face to face because I'd love to sit down with you and have a much deeper conversation in real time, and not on the Zoom, and get
It'd be
into
awesome.
all of what you know and all of what you have to share because it's good stuff and it's what the world needs right now. So thanks again for coming and sharing today.
Thanks, Dan, and I'm loving your work too.
Thank
You're
you.
doing great things out there. So your podcasts are awesome.
Thanks. Catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.